So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our very first Tune Into Data session. My name is Asaf Cohen, and I'm VP of Sales and Customer Success at Future Anthem. Future Anthem created Tune Into Data to be a series of innovative online events designed to educate, entertain, and inspire the online gaming community. With this initiative, we'd like to spark a discussion around AI, and specifically how our industry can harness its power. So for example, how operators and studios can inject behavioral data into every decision they make, from designing new products to improving operational efficiency, and most importantly, creating that best experience for each and every player. Tune Into Data is a community, and we'd like you to become part of our tribe. In order to do that, you need to do two simple things. Follow Future Anthem on LinkedIn, and join our Tune Into Data LinkedIn group, where the discussion will continue after each and every session. The series will include high-profile guests from both inside and outside of the gambling sector. And when deciding who should be our first guest speaker, we thought long and hard about who we think can share insightful and inspiring knowledge on the topic of personalization. Microsoft is a tech giant that gets personalization right. From Xbox across to Microsoft 365 and your LinkedIn feed, they are the pioneers in this space. And this led us to the influential industry leader, Paul Bolt, who is the CMO of Microsoft UK, and we are honored to have him come and share his pearls of wisdom with us on all things data and personalization. Also with us today, straight from Glasgow, is our very own Chief Data Officer, Chris Conroy. Chris has spent the majority of the last decade building and leading data science teams in the gaming industry, and Chris will bring that industry angle into the discussion. So without further ado, Paul, I'd like to start by asking you to share your thoughts around the importance of data in modern consumer-facing companies.
Yes, Asaf, and afternoon, everyone, and thank you for that lofty introduction. I'll do my best to live up to what you've just set out. But yeah, I mean, from my perspective, data-driven businesses win. And I know we're talking about personalization and infusing personalization into customers and customers' journey, but fundamentally, that sits in an organization who understands its data. And so data-driven businesses win. And for me, data-driven businesses need the right underlying tech stack. Of course, you think I'm going to come here today and say that, but they need the right underlying tech stack, the right operational rigor, and then fundamentally the right skills in their organization, because the technology and a number of the technologies that enable personalization and great data insights have been in the market for many, many years. And so it's the rigor and the skills that you need to wrap around the tech to really bring that to life. And I think probably 6 months ago now, Microsoft worked with Goldsmiths University to commission a blueprint for UK competitiveness. And I think we're going to be sharing the link either during or after this webinar with the attendees. But we did that work with Goldsmiths University, and what the research showed was that 46% of the UK's businesses fell into the worst performing category of a quadrant that we built to look at the competitiveness of the UK. And I'd encourage you to go and have a quick read of that report, because there's talk about the underlying technology, the underlying skills capability in your team, as well as, I guess, what you stand for, your purpose and your culture. But the point here is, this is no longer a nice to have or a can that organizations can kick down the road. I think what that report underlines to me, whether you want to look at it through the lens of data, personalization, or digital transformation in its broader sense, what that report really highlights is, as I say, this is no longer a nice to have, but it's vital for organizations if they want to be competitive. So I think this sits at the very heart of the competitiveness of businesses in the UK.
Interesting. And I think there's a few threads there, Paul, that you mentioned that I think potentially tie together. So I think that competitiveness angle, I think there's been a bit of a debate in the tech community around productivity. And, country like the UK is a good example where, on the one hand, the availability of, cutting edge, leading edge, even bleeding edge technology is increasing exponentially. UK productivity is relatively stable over the last 10, 15, 20 years. So I guess the conclusion would be that, companies are not yet, and I think, the statistic on competitiveness would back that up, are not yet necessarily leveraging the technology. And I think one of the things we think about a lot, and probably a bit of a personal passion of mine, is, given that so much amazing technology does exist, and given the enablement that we have available to us in cloud, for someone who's, sees across a lot of different businesses, is there, why do you think, or is it the case that companies are not yet leveraging technology, and what needs to change to increase that competitiveness?
Yeah, it's a great question, Christopher. I think it's hard, is the honest truth. When you think about deploying a new piece of technology into your business, and that new piece of technology is going to enable you to work in different ways, more effective ways, more productive ways. That ultimately then means you need your team to kind of unlearn and relearn a new way of working, to really shorten the kind of time to impact on those investments. And then that means not only do you have to potentially train and retrain staff, but you may not have the right skills in the business in the first place. And when you think about that chain of events after doing quite a simple task like signing a purchase order off for a piece of technology, really, I look at that collectively and say that's cultural transformation. And I think that's one of the biggest hurdles and challenges businesses face, is it's not just about buying the tech. It's then around ingraining it in your business to make you more effective, to make your customer experience improved, to solicit better feedback on your offerings and your products, whatever you use that tech for, and then the skills. And when all three of those are impacted, I think you have to look at that as cultural transformation, and that's a tough challenge for organizations.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think one of the examples we always think about, and I think it does tend to be the bit that businesses might miss, is that, as you say, you can employ the best technology in the world, but I think a lot of businesses potentially don't see the fact that that technology should engender a big cultural transformation. And I guess the example we often use is, if you're going to, where you talked earlier on, and Asaf talked about personalization, if you're going to move into a personalized way of dealing with customers, it's actually quite a fundamental change for a marketing team. You're talking about a level of change that might go from somebody who's making decisions every week about which segment they want to market to a world where, customers are seeing content and promotions via algorithm. And, for that, we always use that example of that person in marketing that used to make that decision about segments. You fundamentally changed their job. And I guess that's partly what we're talking about in terms of cultural transformation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, most importantly, when you look at this through, the goals and objectives you're trying to achieve, so maybe you look at it through a customer lens in terms of acquiring customers, increasing the lifetime value and ultimately the loyalty of that customer to your business. Most organizations have multiple touch points with a customer, and the fact of the matter is, if they're not joined up, and you create a data, in terms of the way your data or user experience isn't joined up, you create silos. And I say there's a lot to my team. Customers feel data silos in a business when they're engaging with them, and they're pretty horrible as well. And some are simple examples, like probably 14, 15 months ago, when we were still checking into hotels, I remember checking into a hotel for probably the 10th or 11th time and being asked, have you stayed with us before? And, would you like a newspaper in the morning? And me thinking, like, what a simple example of at the very edge of your customer experience, just empowering the person behind that desk with a piece of data to say, welcome back. Would you like a copy of the same newspaper? And will we be seeing you for breakfast again? And so, this does go from the very edge of your business to the very core of how you think about modernizing your data estate. Everyone's phoned up their mortgage company and been passed through to another department and repeated the same information again. And so these types of data silos customers feel, and the expectations of consumers and business customers in terms of what those experiences should be and look like have hugely been inflated over the last few years. And people just aren't willing to tolerate those bad experiences anymore. And so many of them are rooted back into what I view as a data silo in terms of what an amazing opportunity that was to create a small but compelling moment for me, and the opportunities missed. It's interesting how organizations need to think about, say, infusing data from the very edge to the core of their business, and then ensuring their teams are empowered and trained to leverage and utilize it at the right moment. And those are two examples we've probably all had. Same hotel, same questions, same mortgage application, different department, same questions. And the world's Darwinian. People will just leave. It's a pretty Darwinian world in terms of experience now.
Let's not talk about mortgage applications. I had a recent experience. I won't name and shame the bank, but I had a recent experience with a bank who refused to deal with any form of communication outside of fax. But we won't name and shame. I think just
to receive a personalized fax.
I was tempted to send them a very personalised fax back, but we didn't. So I think we've talked, I guess, about some of the problems, and I guess some of the typical problems that we all experience as consumers. And again, this area of personalisation, I think one of the things we're really keen to do and tune into data is understand what happens outside of our industry. So I think just probably to give you a bit of a view, Paul, inside the gambling industry, personalisation has been it's almost difficult to call it a hot topic anymore, because it's been a really important area of discussion for, getting on for, I would say, 6 or 7 years. A classic kind of like personalisation problem in the industry, in the terms of we've got thousands of titles of content, we've got millions of customers, we've got multifaceted promotions. So yeah, the current kind of state of the nation and the industry, and certainly the products that we build at Future Anthem, around problems like game recommendation, like promotional optimization, as you mentioned, around tying together the customer experience such that the recommendation that they receive in the lobby on the site is the same as they receive in their push notification, etc. And that's and it's a big focus, obviously for us at Anthem within the industry. But I think within this forum, we'd be really interested from your experience to understand, do you have some really good examples of practice that you see in other industries, from potentially from customers or from non-customers, and what are the next big things that other industries are doing in personalisation that we should potentially be thinking about within gambling?
Yeah, I think that the industry I've consistently most impressed with is what I would describe as the new breed of kind of cloud native and digital retailers. So brands like Gymshark, Boohoo, Missguided, ASOS, etc., who have been born and grown in the cloud in many respects, and so they don't have some of the technical legacy and the technical debt that other organizations do. And so I know, sometimes I sit in conferences and, the Netflixes of the world and the Ubers of the world are held up. And I think most people sit in the conference and think, I'm never going to have a DevOps team like Uber, but thanks for the example today. But I think those organizations do an incredibly good job in terms of, a really exquisite understanding, individual by individual, of that customer in terms of what they buy, what they are likely to buy, when they have a propensity to buy, what type of content they have a propensity to engage with, and which topics they don't. And just a really, really good, exquisite view on there. And of course, interestingly, I would say most people, there's nothing worse than bad marketing. Most people, hate being marketed to because there's a lot of bad marketing out there. But when marketing is good, and it's driving, and it's relevant, and it feels personalized to you, and it's driving up your engagement with the brand, that's a really magic combination for increasing the lifetime value of that customer, and the kind of the repeat purchasing and the velocity of the purchasing. So I would say some of those digital retailers have done an incredibly good job in that space. And then of course, we talk about uncompetitiveness. I still have a letter addressed to the former resident of my current house, which I've tried to get off the mailing list of a company that sells seeds for almost 3 years. It still arrives every quarter, addressed to Dear Unspecified Christopher. So clearly Christopher hadn't told them what his pronoun was when he filled in the contact form, and I can't get off it. And so there's great examples of where marketing can make you feel very close to a brand and it feels very personal and tailored and relevant to you, and you feel engaged by it. And I think personalization in data and AI can enable you to drive that level of personalization. And maybe there's an example of the Dear Unspecified Christopher circular I still get every quarter to my house. So I think those guys have done a really good job in terms of raising the bar for traditional retailers in terms of what personalization and personal service looks like in today's world.
Yeah,
Now we got,
that's really helpful.
sorry, Chris, we've got 2 more minutes. I know that it's short today. So yeah, last question to Paul. Please.
Yeah, I was going to say, so I think what you meant, again, kind of a few threads tying together, because I think I certainly was that person in the audience a few years ago, looking at some of the conferences and like, oh my God, that's, how do you actually get there? And I think, definitely what we've found and what I've found, working for a cloud native business is, it is an amazing opportunity, because to build something in the cloud without that legacy, and I know what that legacy and that kind of those silos are like, has been a massive advantage and actually an eye opener in terms of the ability. I think I would definitely say that, for the companies out there that are dealing with legacy, rather than thinking about we have to migrate everything, if you actually just choose a use case and choose a deliverable and say, we're going to personalize that one page, we're going to get it done by, the end of the summer, and we're going to put a few people around it, it's a really good place to start. I think the final thing I would ask is, and I'm conscious you've got a really long amount of time, we've obviously built our technology within Azure, and we utilize a lot of Microsoft technology. But I think one of the main reasons that we've done it in the cloud, obviously, is that we, no disrespect to you guys, we also utilize a lot of non-Microsoft technology, which is the kind of beauty of that ecosystem. Really curious, I think the audience will be, how big a culture shift, because we talked about culture, how big a culture shift was that Microsoft kind of 10 years ago, when, historically you had a bit of a reputation for being, potentially close to non-Microsoft technologies?
Yeah, I think anyone who follows Microsoft will be aware of the journey the organization has been on in the last 10 years in terms of kind of reinventing and rediscovering what made Microsoft special initially. So I think from and I hope, by the way, people on this organization choose to partner with us and choose our tech. I think in the probably 20 seconds I have left, I would say, if I look at Azure today, intelligent edge to an intelligent core, a beautifully sophisticated suite of services available, AI infused throughout. We think of it as the world's computer. So bring your apps, bring your preferred programming code, and come and work on our platform. Everyone is welcome. It's Azure alone is probably a great example of the cultural transformation and as a result some of the business decisions we've made. From open source code to containers. We're the world's computer. So if you've not looked at us for a while, I would encourage you to come back and take a look at what's in Azure today. It's a very intoxicating blend of IaaS and PaaS. So we'd love to see you building your apps with us.
Thanks, Paul. That's your CMO coming up, floating at the end of the conversation. Thanks for that. So we've spoken about the importance of using data to create personalization. Our players are basically digital consumers, so they expect us to serve them a personal experience the same way as when they shop online or consume entertainment. We've discussed the challenges of doing that and how AI can help us. And I'd like to thank Paul and Chris for their time today, and thank you all our audience who have joined us for this first session of Tune Into Data. If anything you heard today sparks thoughts, if you've got any questions to Paul or Chris, or if you'd like to give us feedback or ideas for the next session, please don't be shy and share your thoughts with us on the LinkedIn group page, which appears in the chat. You can also approach us directly on our email addresses, which should also be in the chat. It was a pleasure having you today with us, and I'm looking forward to the next Tune Into Data, which will be in August. See you all there. Bye now.
Thank you.
Cheers.